let's just go ahead and start with wolves in Oregon. They're becoming an increasing issue, and I think a lot of people have looked to you as a representative that might, help some of these ranchers that are having issues. And so I was just wondering, are you looking to federally delist the wolf, or are you kind of working towards any solution for these Oregon ranchers?
Well, first of all, thank you for asking. It's a very, very important issue for much of the district, and I think it's going to be more of the district because the wolf population is expanding in Oregon. The challenge for ranchers is that if the wolf is listed, you can't do anything when they come out and kill your calves, and that's an extremely expensive thing for the rancher, and they feel powerless because the wolf is protected. And so the real challenge is figuring out how to make sure we don't have more wolves than the wildlife population will bear, because that's what they're supposed to be keeping in check. Certainly not designed to come out and eat cattle. What I'm doing is bringing a bill to force the delisting of wolves in the half of Oregon where they're still listed, and the same in Washington State. And it's odd because Oregon and Washington State have been divided into one half where they're not protected and another half where they are. And it makes it extremely difficult, particularly if you have a ranch that is cut in half by that artificial barrier. But anyway, I'm bringing that bill, and my hope is that we will get it passed and that there will be no listing of the wolves in Oregon or Washington State. Oddly enough, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife came out and said that they did not want the wolf listed, that we have literally thousands and thousands of wolves, and so there's no reason to have them listed. But a judge saw otherwise and ruled that they could not be delisted. And that's one of the reasons we have this kind of odd arrangement right now.
And if that bill doesn't get passed, is this something that's going to continue to be on your plate, that you're going to continue to work towards to find some solutions for? Absolutely, and I'm happy to say that the Trump administration has already indicated a willingness to help us address this issue, because that administration understands the challenges that go with ranching, and the administration wants to help and has been helpful. That's good to know. I know a lot of people, when they go to Facebook and they talk about, their wolf issues, they're like, please get this to President Trump. So that's interesting that his administration is helpful. Supportive. Well, so right now it's really, the court has indicated that they think that until we have wolves reestablished in all of the other states where they currently aren't, they will remain listed, which is a bit odd. We went up to Minnesota, where I was chair then at that time of the Water Wildlife Subcommittee of Natural Resources in Congress. They have 3,000 to 4,000 wolves in that state. 3,000 to 4,000 wolves. Mm-hmm. And so we talked to a mom who had 3 little kids, and she will not let them go outside and play for fear of something happening. And the same was true down by Lakeview. There was a wolf, and it was wearing a collar, and they saw that it was running near where little kids were waiting to get on a school bus. And so that wolf was taken out. The Trump administration saw immediately the danger it was presenting to children, and that gave them the authority to go forward and remove the wolf. We got to have more of that type of rational thought in this space. Yeah, I was there 2 or 3 days before that wolf was lethally removed, and I talked to those families and saw that bus stop, where just across the highway, where some of the suspected depredations were. So, but continuing, let's talk about Oregon's forests, and you said that you're trying to keep Oregon's forests strong, and so what are you working towards right now? Well, I'm very happy to have been able to vote for the great big beautiful bill. I call it the Triple B bill, and that bill contains provisions that Bruce Westerman, the chair of Natural Resources, a engineer and a forester, put into it, and those provisions allow for 20-year leases of forest land that will give those who hold the leases the power and authority for long-term management of space. It's a huge step forward, and one that we desperately need. We have 30 million acres of forest in Oregon, and a huge amount of it is overgrown and needs to be
needs to be managed in a way that recognizes the incredible danger overgrown forests present, not just to people, but to the animals and to the land itself. So I'm very, very happy to be working with Bruce Westerman on these things, and I'm happy that the administration is extremely supportive.
And as we talk about, forest management, what are your thoughts on Lomacotsi project, which is local in Ashland, being impacted by some funding cuts, and one of their youth programs that helps support wildland firefighters across multiple states? Are there concerns there?
Well, of course there's concerns. The challenge in any budget reduction is that you do actually have to reduce the budget. And so somewhere, someplace, there are going to be reductions because we have to. We're spending $2 trillion more a year than we have. And so whatever we do, it's going to hurt, because although many times what government does is done inefficiently, it's almost always being done for something good. And so when you go in and say, hey, we've got to stop, something good is going to stop. But when you don't have the money and you're borrowing it, you're really doing something really bad for younger people, because they're going to have to pay it back. And they'll pay it back any number of ways. The most obvious is in higher interest rates on just about everything. So why in the world would we, knowing the good that is being done by that organization, and by the way, I have their folder in my room here. I looked at it this morning. And so they're doing great. They're doing great things for the forest. I met with them, and just very, very impressive. But the truth of the matter is there are going to be reductions across the board, and that's one of them. Sad, but we have to reduce somewhere.
And with those long-term leasings, I know a lot of people in Oregon are really concerned about that old growth logging. Is there, what type of measures are you setting forth to make sure that you are still protecting that old growth?
Right. So all of the rules that apply to those protections stay in place. They don't go away. What you're trying to do is make sure that you aren't constantly changing whoever it is that's on the land, and you're trying to also give those who are trying to actually make money in that space enough time to do it, because the market goes up, the market goes down, and if you have a short period of time, it doesn't work well. If you have a longer period of time, then you can take some of those low market environments and work your way through them.
Absolutely. And as we continue to talk about the big beautiful bill, there are thousands of Southern Oregons who are relying on the Oregon Health Plan and Medicaid for their medical coverage. How are you justifying, supporting working requirements changing and funding cuts that could result in, I think across the country it was up to over 7.5 million people could lose their Medicaid. So what are your thoughts with that?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for asking. The Medicaid program is extremely important. It's essential for many, many, many people. And that's why it was created back in 1965, to help people who didn't have money, who absolutely needed care, particularly older people. So let me start by saying it's an essential program, and much of what we're doing is designed to make sure it remains a viable program, a sustainable program. The cost of Medicaid has gone through the roof over the past 10 to 15 years. It's astounding how far and how much it's expanded. Even the most liberal person will tell you that there is waste and fraud and abuse in that program, and that's what we are addressing. That's exactly what we're addressing. So I just want to point out that 40% of my district is on Medicaid, 40%. And that's illustrative, I think, of a whole bunch of things. One is that we don't have the type of jobs that we used to have that let people earn the money they need so they don't have to be on Medicaid. So this getting back into the woods is a really, really important thing. And making better use of our resources is important, so we reduce the number of people on Medicaid. The population that's covered by Medicaid, about 1.4 million people in Oregon roughly, about 60% will not be involved in the work requirements at all, because they are in the original group of people for whom the program was established. The other 40% are what we call the expansion population, or the Affordable Care Act population, and that 40% will be exposed to the work requirements. Of those, we think about 380,000 will be exposed in Oregon to that work requirement, but many are already working, roughly 60%. So that takes you down to about 170,000 people who may not be working for whatever reason. There are many exceptions to the work requirement. For example, if you're taking care of an elderly relative, if you're taking care of a little kid, if you're unable to work, if you're in a place where the unemployment rate is 8% or higher, all of those kinds of exceptions are there to protect people who have to work. But the first thing one has to understand is that this is not, you're not going to somebody that's in a nursing home and saying, hey, you got to get a job. That's not what's happening. What's happening is we're going to young people who are doing nothing for whatever reason and saying, if you want free or almost free medical care, you need to get out and at least volunteer. It's 20 hours a week. And you can volunteer for it, you can go to school for it, you can get a job for it, you can be taking care of someone to meet that requirement. And if people say, well, if I start working, I'm going to work my way right out of eligibility, the answer is no. If you look at those 20 hours a week and see how much the $15 an hour, it's still roughly half to 2/3 of what you can earn and still be eligible for Medicaid.
Yeah, and I just think that there are a lot of older adults, a lot of low-income families who, they hear this and they're still kind of nervous about, some of these changes. And so are there any provisions that you're putting forth to make sure that 40% of your district, is, safe with their benefits?
Well, they're safe with their benefits. The question is, will they make the choice to work if they're able? If they make the choice not to work, then they still will have care, because we still have the requirement that if you go to the emergency room, you will receive stabilizing care. And many people right now who qualify for Medicaid don't get on it because they go to the emergency room. You know why? The wait for Medicaid's on the national average about 3 weeks. 3 weeks. So if you go to the ER, their average wait is 3 hours. So many people go, well, I'm not going to wait 3 weeks. I'm going to go to the emergency room. So that safety net is there. And so for people to say, well, we're not going to have any medical care, no, yes, you do. It's just that it won't be Medicaid because you, for whatever reason, have decided you don't want to work. By the way, there's 21 million people in America not working. They're not even trying to work. They're not counted in the unemployment list. What are they doing? I mean, so yeah, everybody has an obligation in this country to try to make this country work, and that means producing, that means doing things. And so the goal here is that we remind people that nothing's free, and that they need to be in there like the rest of us, like you and others, working.
And also as well, SNAP, there are also some age requirements changing with work as well. And so, parents who have children, they now have to go, or, have the same work requirements now. Instead of having children that are 18, now it's down to 7. And then again, the adult age range is now extending from 54 to 64. And so what were the goals specifically with those changes?
Well, so I'm not on the AG committee where those changes were made, but I certainly have studied them. And the concept is that the program, like all of these programs, has become more and more and more expensive. And we're having to figure out some way of making sure we preserve the program. The SNAP program is another essential, important program, and one that many people in my district correctly take advantage of. So the challenge has been, how do we make sure that those who can work are working and are not simply living off the government? Those are why we're taking those steps. There's also something that's really, really sad that's happened in Oregon on that program, and that is that since Oregon doesn't have any skin in the game as a state, it has abused the amount of SNAP benefits given to people, and many times, I want to say last year, I hope my numbers are right, 244 million in benefits that were inappropriately extended. 244, that's Oregon. And so we can't have that. So one of the changes in the SNAP program is to say, okay, every state will be responsible for 5% of the program's cost. And thus, if you're giving away money, you're giving away a bunch of it's yours. And if without that skin in the game, the program is being abused. We can't have that. All of these programs have to work better, more efficiently, and do a better job of protecting the people that need the protection.
And I know part of that also was that the state will also have to front 75% of the costs for the administrative costs for SNAP. Is there any concern there with Oregon, finding that room in their budget to fund that?
Well, of course there's concern. I was in the Oregon legislature for 12 years. I understand the challenges that the budget writers in Salem face. On the other hand, they cannot be cavalier with the federal government's money either. So the challenge there is to make sure that the state is doing its part in managing this program. This, by the way, I want to emphasize, we will still, I'm going back to Medicaid for a minute. People said there's cuts. We will spend more next year on Medicaid than we did this year. So how can people come in and say, well, you're cutting? You go, stop. We're spending more. And so that's going to be true on into the future. The idea is, how in the world do we slow down this explosion of cost? And the same is true with Medicaid, with SNAP.
Perfect. And, we talk a lot about decreasing funding and making sure that there's not fraud in the system. But then the part of the big, beautiful bill is that there's an increase in funding for defense spending. And so I was just wondering, where is the, a lot of people look at that and they say, oh, well, we have the biggest army in the country, or in the world. Why are we increasing that funding, but defunding, SNAP and Medicaid? I
don't think we have the biggest army in the world. I think China does, but I think we have the biggest military in that sense. Also, China is dramatically increasing its fleet of ships. I think it went by us on the fly some time ago. But what's really challenging is to watch the war in Ukraine and between Ukraine and Russia, and see how that war is being fought. It's being fought with drones. And so if you look at the increase that's in the bill, much of it is focused on increasing our ability to utilize drones and all that goes with that kind of warfare. And so what you see happening is an evolution of how wars are fought, and that evolution is being addressed in this bill. The world is a dangerous place. And there, by the way, I'm a huge supporter of the military, but I would also say, I will assure you, that there's waste, fraud, and abuse there, and we have people looking into that on our committees right now. And so the challenge is, how do we make sure we maintain our military while at the same time addressing those issues?
So there's making sure that there's no fraud across the entire aspect of all of this, and not just these specific areas. Absolutely true, and absolutely true. It's the military has always had an advantage in the sense that we know we absolutely have to protect ourselves. So I understand the reluctance to delve too deeply into that space, but we're doing that. Perfect. And I know part of this, this bill as well, there's, no tax on tips, the Trump kids savings, and then, some of these tax cuts, but they're only lasting through the Trump presidency. And so I'm just wondering, what is, why draw the line there? Are they not, sustainable long term? Well,
that's a great question. So this is a reconciliation bill. So it has special rules that apply to it. And so many of the dates that you see on different things, whether it's when certain new approaches to SNAP or new approaches to Medicaid take place when they start, all of those are designed to fit into that reconciliation space. One would, of course, want those programs to last longer than just the Trump presidency, but there's the small matter of making sure they fit into the reconciliation numbers. As I'm sure seen, there's many people in my caucus who are very unhappy with any sort of expenditure, be it on the tax side or on any other side. And so our goal has been to balance these things out, and that's what you see happening with those dates.
Perfect. And as we talk about student loans, cutting back on how many options there are for repayment, when we're seeing so much struggle when it comes back to repayment of student loans, why cut down on the options as part of this bill?
The the focus in the student loan space has been on trying to figure out how in the world to get people educated at the college level, while at the same time not creating another entitlement. The Pell Grant is a grant and extraordinarily important. But the idea has been, how do we make sure that people aren't just going to college for the heck of it? Because I went to college, and I know a lot of my fellow students weren't there to learn. They were there to party, and going to college was a good excuse. So what we're trying to do is say, no, wait, this is real money. You may be borrowing it. You will have to pay it back. And make sure that what you're doing here is going to help you pay it back. That's the whole idea here. It's just that we can't create or build on something that's already been created, which is a huge waste of everybody's money. And worse, it's doing the kid, well, it's not a child, the young adult, a huge disservice by saddling them with huge debt. So I worked on this in the Oregon legislature and realized all of a sudden that most students had no idea what they were getting into as they're busy being told, here, borrow this money. And you know, it's like free money, and wink, wink, nod, nod, maybe you'll pay it back, maybe you won't. No, that's not how it's got to work. Mm-hmm. It's got to be a real investment, and one that both the country gets something back for, and you as the individual get something back for.
Yeah, and I know, I come from a long line. I've been really lucky to come from a long line of, college, family members who have gone to college, but my grandpa always tells me that he would work for a summer, painting, and that would pay for almost his entire year of school. And so as we talk not only about repayments and loans, but what are you doing to address the fact that university now is just so expensive that it's not the same. You can't work for a summer and pay off your year of university. It's years of working summers.
Well, I can relate to the approach that your granddad used, because I used the same approach. But I also worked almost the entire time I was in college, and part of the time I was in law school, because that's the only way I could pay for it, and so, or at least help pay for it. As more and more government money has come into it, of course colleges have raised their costs, because it's easy to do when no one's paying any attention, and it's, quote, free money, end quote. So we're a bit of a victim of our own creation. Colleges raising prices because the money was there for them to take. And so somehow we have to turn that around and say, wait, stop. This money is not free money. This money is taxpayers' money, and it's students' money. And for goodness sakes, stop raising your prices. And that's going to be extremely important, because we've got to have educated kids in young adults. So we've got to do a good job in that space, and it starts by being more careful in how we make these loans and how we get the money back.
And how are you planning to hold not just students accountable with these loans, but these universities? Right.
So you'll see in this bill, I'm sure you've seen it, the universities are now going to be responsible for kind of a risk-sharing arrangement, and thus when they're the facilitator of the loan, the university is going to have to ask itself, is this student going to graduate, get a job, and pay this loan back? Because the university is now going to bear part of the risk if the student doesn't pay the loan back. And so I'm checking into it now. I'm relatively sure that if the university ends up having to pay part of the person's loan back, then the university will pursue the student and try to get the money from that student. So what we're basically doing is saying, hey, university, you're going to have to take part of the risk because you're the one making the loan. It's the government's money, but you're the one in charge of who's going to take it, and explaining to that student that they're going to have to pay it back. And if they don't, then the university's stuck with it. We know that universities are going to be paying for part of this. And it's going to be a challenge for them for a while, because it's hard to wean yourself off of free money. And yet that's what we have to do.
Is there concern there that there's going to be less access, though, to secondary education instead of shifting the responsibility to universities and holding them to lowering the cost of education?
So we absolutely want to maintain access. But the challenge in all of these situations is recognizing that we've got to do whatever we've been doing better. We have to. The money is not there. You can tell the bond market is going up. They're starting to raise in order to buy our debt, they want more interest, and that's driving up the cost of carrying the huge debt we already have. And they're watching to see if we're going to be doing the type of things that are in this bill to try to do everything we've been doing better, more carefully. And that's why you see us tightening up on all of these programs. We have to, because if we don't, it will be everybody paying the bill in the form of higher interest. This year, I think our interest on our national debt is almost $1 trillion. $1 trillion. If we didn't have the debt, we'd have that trillion for something else. But no, instead, we're paying it for money we spent years ago. The challenge for us right now is to somehow do good things, but do them better.
And as we get closer to our time, I think I just got a time check for about 7 minutes here. Let's go ahead and talk about tariffs and that shift that the president has taken recently.
Well, his goals are correct. He's trying to bring manufacturing back to the United States. He's also trying to address the challenges that another country's tax system presents. My wife and I were just in Greece, and the taxpayer didn't pay for the trip. Just so you know, I bought her a present because it was her birthday, and the tax was 25%. 25%. And so part of that we got back, had to stand in line for literally an hour, but that kind of a tax on stuff that comes over from the United States to Greece, it has to be in some fashion addressed, and tariffs is a device that we can use to address those things. So his job is hugely complicated. He's good at negotiating. I think they're negotiating with 60 countries right now on making better trade deals for us. So it's working. The tariffs is a really dangerous space, a very dangerous space. A lot of damage has been done already to different people in my district, for example, farmers and nursery owners. Had many contracts with Canada, for example, canceled like a week after the tariffs with Canada went into effect. So I'm looking forward to seeing this turn around and make everybody whole for the damage that they've thus so far suffered. I will tell you that my folks that I've spoken with on this, I've spoken to, I don't know, many, are patient, and they want to see how it works out.
Yeah, and I know, the Trump administration has said that, it should be the bigger businesses that are kind of eating some of these costs when it comes to the tariff, like Walmart. And yet we're seeing, those smaller farms and the smaller companies, they're the ones that are being impacted. And so is there any future plans to shift that cost to make sure that the bigger businesses are eating those?
Well, you mean cost in the sense of the costs that foreign countries impose upon us in retaliation for our tariffs. You mean
Yes.
those costs? So I think it's safe to say that the big guys are suffering just like the small guys, but they're more able to withstand these storms, financial storms. The Great Big Beautiful Bill contains an increase in the reference price for wheat of about $1 a bushel. And that's a very, very, very good thing for the wheat farmers, who I think are taking a huge hit in their export market opportunities. So that's going to help the small guy and the big guy. But there's no doubt we have to be cognizant of the damage that's being done by tariffs. And to that end, I've asked people to let our office know. And then we reach out to the White House and say, look, this is bad news, and we need to do something about it. The response we received 2 months ago was wait and see. More recently has been more refined, and that's why I think you saw changes made in the president's approach to tariffs by delaying them and pausing them, and so he's doing his best to make it work.
And I want to give you the floor to talk about your work on the energy commerce. I know energy is a huge topic right now.
Right, so I was on Judiciary for 4 years, and I enjoyed my time with Jim Jordan. He's a great guy, and he's a good friend. I realized, though, that even though I'm a lawyer, my area of expertise was more in the energy and commerce space. And so I campaigned to get on the Energy and Commerce Committee. I got on the committee. I stayed on the Water Subcommittee, the Wildlife Subcommittee at the same time. I'm on 3 subcommittees on energy and commerce also, and those 3 are the energy sub, the healthcare sub, and the commerce sub. The commerce sub has everything to do with artificial intelligence, which is extraordinarily interesting, unbelievably interesting, and hugely, hugely impactful on our futures. Probably as impactful as I've heard people say the wheel, as impactful as the creation of fire. And if you think about AI as a means of mining the data, the amount, and coming out with good ideas, you can suddenly see how impactful it's going to be. I'm also happy to be on the energy sub, and we talk all the time about transmission and about generation and about the dams on the lower Snake and protecting them, and about the water coming out of Canada under the treaty with Canada, all of which are areas that I'm extremely familiar with and very happy to be involved in. On healthcare, I was our little hospital's lawyer back in Ontario for 18 years, so I have a good background in that space. I've been very happy to be working on those really, really challenging issues. I will tell you that there's much in that Medicaid space that needs to be addressed that has not been addressed in this bill, but we will continue to work on it. This is just one step, and the waste, fraud, and abuse has to be addressed, but there are other issues that we will be addressing.
Perfect. And as we look forward, what are some of your priorities, and how are people really going to see that play go into effect?
Right. Well, so this is this valley, Medford, the Grants Pass area, all of this space is by far and away the largest population in my district, close to 300,000 people out of the 750,000 roughly folks. So I focused my attention on what the Chamber of Commerce here and the mayor and other people have told me is the most important, and that is transportation. And so I met now 3 times with the U.S. Department of Transportation to talk about your South Interchange. And so that's a $344 million project. It's huge for the future of this valley. And I'm hopeful, having now discussed it with the Trump administration, that we have their attention. What will happen, I can't tell you, but at least it's on the table. And it's something that would help this community enormously, its future, and it would help address the issue of that earthquake that might happen, will happen someday, and the viaduct will collapse. And you've got to have some way of going around this town, otherwise the I-5 is going to be a disaster. So I'm working on that. I'm working on all the water issues that we used to work on. I'm working on the healthcare issues. I actually asked former Governor Kitzhaber to help me on these issues, and to his great credit, he's been helping. He is in no way whatsoever to have it suggested that he had anything to do with the Great Big Beautiful Bill. The contents of it, I'm sure he's not happy with, but the issues he's been discussing with me are extremely helpful, and at some point they will come into play. So healthcare is a huge thing. The forest, of course, getting back into the woods, absolutely essential for this community, because unless everybody wants to dies of asphyxiation with smoke, we've got to do something. And so I've been so happy to see stuff in the Great Big Beautiful Bill, and I've been working on other things to try to help. The secure rural schools is in the Great Big Beautiful Bill, so that funding mechanism is there, and I'm extremely happy for that. And it would be for last year, this year, and next year. And of course, I want to do my best to help continue that funding.
Perfect. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you would like to before we wrap up?
Well, I want to mention something about communication, because the Energy and Commerce Committee has jurisdiction over that space. I'm not on that sub, but I'm extremely interested, and I'm very happy to be here with you today going over these kinds of issues. And I think that means of communicating all this happening to your audience is extraordinarily important. So I just want to thank you for this opportunity, and to try to share in more detail the contents of that bill. It's 1,100 pages long, and so there's much in it that, frankly, I'd rather had been done differently, but that's true for every one of us. So when you put something like this together, there's going to be a lot that you really, really, really agree with, and others not so much, but it's a good bill.
If you could change one thing about it, what would you change?
Well, I'm a big supporter of Pell Grants, and so I'll be looking carefully at what's being done in that space. I understand the thinking in reducing the Pell Grant for those who are taking fewer than, I think it's going to be 14 hours when it was 12, or I don't know if my hours are exactly right, but those grants are terrifically important, particularly for community colleges. And so I would probably go back and look at that really carefully and see if it's going to achieve the purpose that the writers had in mind.
All right, well, perfect. Well, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you guys
Yeah.
reaching out and letting us know.
I'm happy to be here.